Hi, I'm Benjamin Rolnick, and I'm always eternally fascinated by getting the edge in life. I'm eternally fascinated by personal development, by helping to make my body, my mind, my spirit stronger, better, fitter, faster, whatever it is, which I call growth. Now, there's another word for growth, which I think is going to be more fitting in this conversation today, and that word is progress. Now, I asked people in one of my star labs, I said to them, well, how do you draw progress in your life? If you were to draw the line of progress of how you experience progress in your life, how would you draw it? And you can think about this question as I draw this one out that always seems to be the case. And people basically start off, they say, let's just say they're in a relationship, or they're starting a new business, or they're entering a new career or a new era with their art. Whatever it is, it kind of looks something like this. Oh my God, I just met the most amazing guy. He's so great. He's so great. But I hate his smile. He sucks in bed. Or, oh my God, I just had the most amazing vision for my business. It's going to be such a great business. And then boom, no investor wants to invest in it. I can't raise the money. Or, oh my God, I'm such a great artist. I'm so amazing. I'm so amazing. But my parents don't believe in me. They hate me. To, oh my God, yeah, but my album's doing well, but boom, the critics hate me. And it's just this constant up, down, up, down, up, down battle. And some people drew ones that look like circles and crazy little cartoon characters, whatever it is. So I asked everybody, well, why did nobody draw a line that looks like this? Why did nobody draw a line of linear progress? And I got a few blank stares, and then finally, people started speaking up and they said, because that's not realistic. Nobody experiences progress like that in life. We all know we take 10 steps forward and we take 7 steps back. That there is no just constantly never-ending improving life. I mean, oh my God, that's like totally unreal. That's boring. That's stupid. Why would you even suggest such a thing, Ben? So I said, okay, well, let's look at this line right here. How does this make you feel? And people thought about it for a second. They were like, realistic. This is life. And I said, no, really drop into it and imagine it. You're going up, you're going down, all of these peaks and valleys in it. Be in it for one of the moments in your life. Like imagine progress that you're experiencing right now with your passion or with your body or with a relationship or with your career. The ups and the downs, the peaks of the valley of it. How does that make you feel looking at it? People felt into it and they said, it makes me feel so anxious that the future is just so uncertain. I could be going up one day and down the next. I could be at the top of my career and then the economy crashes. I could think that I wrote the world's greatest novel and then it's rejected by every publisher that I send it to. And then they started saying, well, I feel afraid. I don't even want to start a new project because I know that I'm going to be thrown around on this mechanical bowl of life and I don't know where things are going to leave me. Or they say I get angry. I'm right at the top. I'm right where I want to be. And then boom, something knocks me up. What the heck? I don't like that. Or they get sad because they're like, well, I don't want to experience this anymore in my life. This is such a painful process. I don't like this. Or I've lost so many things, all of these valleys. These are times that I've quit. These are times I've given up on other people or times I've given up on myself. Or they feel shame. They feel the shame of thinking that I should be experiencing this in my life, but I'm only experiencing this. What's wrong with me? So if you think that happiness is about meeting or exceeding your expectations in life, meaning you're going up, you're meeting and exceeding your expectations, and then boom, you drop down, you're not meeting or exceeding your expectations in life anymore, then this path, this whole diagram of progress that you might have drawn, that so many people draw in their life to represent how they experience themselves, how they experience moving towards their destinies, is really a picture of misery. It's really a picture of misery. Because how does this make us feel? This makes us feel so good. When you really tap into it and you tap into the image of you're growing every single day. You're progressing every single day. And every day in every way you're getting better and better. You're getting stronger and stronger. You're getting more and more fit in your body, in your environment, your communication with your relationships. You're getting smarter. You're getting more adept at your business. You're selling more products. And every day in every way you're getting better and better. How does that make you feel? How does it feel to be constantly, never-endingly improving improving and growing in life. It feels pretty darn exciting if you really allow yourself to get into what it would be like to progress every day, every single day of your life, every moment, to continue going up and up and up. What would we call that? We'd call that happiness. That's really what it is. Progress equals happiness. And I think that that's pretty clear. Because here we continue to meet and exceed our expectations. And here it's total and utter misery because we don't. Now, here's the thing, is that if you experience more of this in your life than you do of this, then what I'm about to say and the rest of this video is very, 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 did I say very, 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 very important for you to learn and for you to understand. Because this is the picture of misery in life. And this is the picture of joy and happiness. And there is a way to go from this to this. But here is the next question. Why does your line of progress, why does your life look like this? With this series of peaks and valleys, and not just like this, like a straight shot linear progress up. And people said, well, because of the economy crashing, and because things don't always turn out the way that I want to, or because he dumped me, or because I didn't get the job that I really wanted, or because nobody understands my genius in life, because of all of these dips down, I didn't get the money that I needed, I didn't get all of this that I wanted, the weather was bad, whatever it is, it's all based on reasons and circumstances and all different types of things. And what I've defined is that there are 6 reasons why we experience this in life and not this. And I call them our 6 opponents of destiny. Now, today we're going to cover one of those opponents of destiny, which by the end of this video could literally take you immediately in this moment from this picture of progress as misery to this picture of progress as happiness. And that one opponent of destiny is results. Results. Results are the biggest enemy of achievement. Results are the biggest enemy of success. Results are the biggest enemy of happiness. And you might be thinking to yourself now, I'm not sure why I clicked on this. I don't know why I'm watching this anymore, because I thought results are the only way to become successful in life. I thought that you need results in order to actually achieve anything that you want to achieve in life. And I'm saying, no, actually, results are the #1 enemy of success. And let me prove it to you. So there was a man named Edward Deming who was a famous business theorist, and he was responsible for the big revolutionary boom of industry in Japan. And he had this really fascinating thought experiment, and it went something like this. Imagine that you've got a target on the ground. Here's your target. And you're trying to hit the bullseye of the target. Boom. Right in there, right in the bullseye of the target. And the way that you're doing it is you've got a funnel. You got a funnel here standing over the target, and you're dropping ball bearings through the funnel to try to hit this center point. Now, let's just say that you begin this experiment and you drop the first ball bearing through your funnel, and it hits right here to the bottom left of your target. What do? Well, I mean, it's really obvious, right? You just move either the target or you move the funnel, right? Isn't that like the most simple thing I could have ever asked you? Well, here's what Deming said. He said that if that is your strategy for success, no wonder you're failing. No wonder you're failing. So some of you might be thinking to yourself, what the heck? This seems so obvious. Of course, if you hit to the bottom left, you just move the funnel just a bit up and to the right, and boom, you're going to nail it every time. And Deming said, absolutely not. See, that is the mistake that most people make, because you don't have enough data yet to know why you're hitting to the bottom left and why you're not hitting the center of the target. For example, maybe there was just a breeze, a little slight breeze that moved the ball bearing down into the left, and the next one you drop through would hit to the center. Or maybe it's because the ball bearings are just not heavy enough to hit straight down below the funnel. So it's about moving the funnel closer to the target, or up away from the target, not laterally. See, you don't know why until you have enough data to find out why. And see, this is why so many people fail. They fail because they're so afraid of standing in the fire of rejection, standing in the fire of failure, standing in the fire of results, that they end up quitting before they ever have enough data to truly get things right. Now, what I found for myself is that failure lives in the world of results, but the truth is that success doesn't. Because why are you really looking at results anyways? Are you looking at them to see how successful you are? Or are you looking at them for a point of calibration to see where you're failing? See, most people don't look for success in results. They look for failure in results, which is why they consistently get it and they quit. So there's a great playwright named Chekhov that said it would take a god to determine success from failure without making a result. Without making a mistake. And I'm going to give you guys a little test today to see how good of a god you are at telling success from failure. So I'm going to say a series of stories. There's going to be quite a few of them. There's so many more that I can tell. And you tell me, and you can think about it, literally say it out loud, quick, success or failure, about whether or not you think these stories are success stories or failure stories. So let's start with the first, that a brilliant scientist who was studying staphylococcus bacteria, and that was literally his life work, goes on vacation. And when he comes back, he finds all of these samples that he had left on his lab bench had completely molded over. They were absolutely and utterly destroyed. And he was absolutely devastated. Success or failure? Quick, success or failure? Success. Andrew Fleming called that mold juice that had grown over his staphylococcus bacteria penicillin and ended up winning the Nobel Prize for it in 1942. So a man writes his first novel when he's 16 years old, a brilliant, brilliant kid, and then goes on to write his second novel, which is literally one of my favorite novels of all time. He wins the Pulitzer Prize a year after it's published, and it goes on to sell millions of copies, and it's translated into 18 different languages. Success or failure? Quick. Failure. So after being rejected by only 2 publishers, John Kennedy Toole shelled the Confederacy of Dunces and then tied a garden hose from his exhaust pipe through his window and killed himself. Now, his mother took the manuscript and over the course of 10 years, experiencing such utter rejection from everyone she encountered, ended up getting the book published. And a year after it was published, she posthumously won the Pulitzer Prize, and now the book has gone on to sell millions of copies, been translated into 18 languages, and it is so good. But imagine if he could have withstood a bit more of that rejection. We would have so much great literature from this man. He's literally one of my favorite writers ever, and he only wrote really one book. So frustrating. How about this? 3M hired a scientist to develop a super strong adhesive that could bind to anything. And what he came up with was an adhesive so weak, such a weak adhesive, it couldn't bind anything together. It couldn't even bind 2 pieces of paper together. Success or failure? Success. So Spencer Silver couldn't find a purpose for this weak adhesive at first, and it took him over 5 years to find it, but finally 3M called this super weak adhesive Post-it notes, and we all know how the rest of that story goes. Or take Catherine Elizabeth Hudson. Let's see if her story is a success or a failure. She grew up extremely sheltered. She was from the church. She had no access to secular music, and she kind of sung in the choir a bit, and she got her start kind of as a choir singer and totally utterly failed at that, but she was committed to making music. So then she ended up becoming a gospel singer, and she totally and utterly failed at that, and leaving Nashville and thinking to herself, you know what? I wasn't meant for all this country gospel stuff. I was meant to be a pop superstar. She travels to LA and she lands a record deal, only to be dropped. Only to be told that her music wasn't worth anything and to be kicked to the curb. So she tries more stuff and she forms a band, she writes new songs, and she fails again. And then finally she goes, you know what? I'm going to give this one last try. I'm going to create my pop icon sensation. I'm going to do this. And she ends up getting her record deal, only to be dropped again. Success or failure? Success. after nearly 10 years of constant failure, she gets into the studio with a man named Luke, and she writes these words: "This was never the way that I planned, not my intention. I got so brave, drink in hand, lost all discretion. This is not what I'm used to. Just want to try you on. I'm curious for you, caught my attention." And then we all of us sang along to these words: "I kissed a girl and I liked it, the taste of her cherry chapstick. I kissed a girl just to try it, hope my boyfriend don't mind it. It felt so wrong, it felt so right, don't mean I'm in love tonight. I kissed a girl and I liked it, I like it." And if my singing skills haven't completely offended you already, you'd know that we're talking about Katy Perry. And after that song was released, she had instant stardom, and literally today is one of the best-selling female pop artists in the universe. Okay, let's try another one. A boy who didn't even finish high school. He lived on the street. He was homeless for so much of his life, and he decided that he wanted to be a painter. So he painted all of these street art paintings and all whatever, and he ends up selling a lot of paintings. He sells thousands of paintings for a lot of money. Success or failure? Failure. So Basquiat might have sold thousands of paintings during his lifetime, a remarkable achievement, and has paintings today that are worth over $50 million. Can you believe it? $50 million. But he overdosed and died of heroin at 27 years old. 27. Imagine what he could have achieved in his life had he lived a bit longer. Or take this guy, that early on in his life, he went so bankrupt that he had to eat dog food to survive. And finally, when he got the courage to get back into business, get back into the industry, all of his IP was stolen by a company he was supposed to be partnered with. And then he was told that he was a creative, he wasn't a creative person, he was a unoriginal hack. And to make matters worse, on top of that, he gets back into it, and as soon as he's got his big hit, that intellectual property is stolen again from another company, and he's told that, you know what, his vision is not going to work. It's actually going to terrify people. It's going to terrify women. Success or failure? Success. So after he lost the rights to a little mouse named Steamboat Willie, Walt Disney came up with another mouse, Mickey Mouse. And the rest is history. Today, the Disney Corporation is the second largest media conglomerate in the entire world. And Walt Disney has been nominated for more Oscars than anyone on the planet. I would call that a massive success. Or take this guy who had an ingenious idea for how to synthesize ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen. And it led to the revolutionary creation of fertilizers and insecticides and all of these wonderful things. And he even went on to help his country during World War I. Success or failure? Think about this one for a sec. Failure. So Fritz Haber might have won the Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize for his creation, but it also created Zyklon B in his own laboratories, which was not just an insecticide, but his country actually used it for the extermination of human beings in gas chambers during the Holocaust. Oh, and one more thing. Fritz Haber was a Jew. I'll give you one more. So this man had a bit of a tussle with his business partners, and he parted ways with them in order to create just this little idea that he called Il Giornale, which was a little shop and, it was like a little cafe. And he goes out to raise money for it. And he approaches 10 banks, and those 10 banks are like, forget this idea. It's a horrible idea. He approaches 50 banks, and 50 banks say to him, no, this is a horrible idea. Il Giornale is not going to work. I'm sorry, dude. Then he goes to 100 banks. And guess what? 100 banks totally reject him. He does not raise the money. Then he goes to 150 banks, and 150 banks say, no way, pal. You're crazy. You're out of your mind. Then he goes to 200 banks, And 200 banks say, no, this is a terrible idea. Stop while you're ahead. No more banks. He goes to 240 banks. 240 banks say, no way. Finally, he goes to 242 banks to try to raise money for this Il Giornale. And he totally fails. Success or failure? Quick. Success. So Howard Schultz eventually does raise the money that he needed after visiting 242 banks and being rejected by them. So he raises the money and he creates Il Giornale. But more importantly, he buys a little local coffee shop which he had fallen in love with named Starbucks. And if you've been outside anytime recently, you'd know that this was a massive, massive success. So at the beginning I said that Chekhov said that it would take a god to tell success from failure without making a mistake. Now the truth is that some of these instances which I've called successes, you might call failures, and which I've called failures, you might call success. See, that's the point of this whole thought experiment. See, we could do everything right and still get things wrong, like Fritz Haber who developed Zyklon B, or we could do everything wrong and still get things right, like Spencer Silver who developed the Post-it note. See, results are not your friend on the pathway to success. Let me say that again. Results are not your friend on the pathway to success. And let me prove that to you. If they were your friend on the pathway to success, how many banks would you have visited before you just gave up on your stupid coffee idea? Would you have went to 10 banks? After you got rejected by 20 banks to raise money for your concept, would you have just thought to yourself, you know what? This just doesn't seem to be working. Would you have been crazy enough to go to 50 banks? Would you have been insane enough to go to 100 banks? What kind of absolutely insane person gets rejected by 200 banks to raise money for a concept that nobody seems to understand? How crazy do you have to be to go to 242 and still not quit? How many times have you tried to raise money for a project that you've worked on and stop at like 5 people telling you no? Not 242 bank meetings, getting dressed up in a suit and tie, giving a presentation to people who had no interest and told you that your idea was total crap. Or, for example, if you had been tasked to develop a super strong adhesive and you came with an adhesive that couldn't even stick 2 pieces of paper together, how long would it be before you just gave up on this weak adhesive and said, you know what? I failed. I'll admit that I failed. You know what? I'm not always right. There's absolutely no purpose for this. As opposed to just like sticking with it and finding the purpose and creating a Post-it note. Or if you're a musician or you're an artist, how many times would you be willing to change your very name, to change your very image, to change your very musical identity in order to succeed in the business? You know, some people, they change it once and they think to themselves, you know what, this isn't right. They don't go from being a Christian artist to being a gospel artist to being a Nashville artist to being a pop solo artist to being a punk artist to being back a pop solo artist to being an EDM artist. I mean, how many artists really do that before they even break, before they realize, you know what, this music thing is just not for me? How many times would you go bankrupt? How many times would you have your intellectual property stolen from you, literally stolen from under your nose? How many times would you create successful characters only to lose them before you thought to yourself, you know what? Who actually cares about a little mouse anyways? See, what results do is they breed so much failure in life because failure is usually what we're looking for in results. And failure will make you a pessimist quite quickly. And in the words of Wayne Dyer, nobody knows enough to be a pessimist. Nobody knows enough to be a pessimist. You see, the heroes in our lives, the most iconic people that we all love and cherish, were not people that cared about results. They weren't people that cared about outcomes. And the reason why I know this, and the reason why it's absolutely true, is because these were all people who were willing to take consistent action despite all odds and circumstances towards a goal, regardless of the results, regardless of any result that they got along the path. Howard Schultz, 242 bank rejections. I mean, oh my God, it's so inconceivable. It's so easy to look at that and think to yourself, that's like pretty easy. But how many times have you been in a bar and been rejected by a woman or been rejected by a man and just picked yourself right back up with no loss of enthusiasm and said, next? See, it's not that easy. Like the Edward Deming's experiment, most of us can't stand in the fire of results in order to actually get to success. Results are the enemy to all success. So the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard had a lot of really interesting thoughts on this point. And in one of my favorite works by him, called Fear and Trembling, he analyzes the story of Abraham and Isaac. And seeing as over half the world's population ascribes to some form of an Abrahamic religion, I'm sure you're probably familiar with this story. But in case you're not, here's a bit of the backstory. So Abraham and Sarah, his wife, pray to God for over 25 years saying, please help us have a child. Help us have a child. Abraham at this point is 100 years old and Sarah is totally barren and they're not having a child. And finally, Abraham and Sarah have a child. It's an absolute miracle, which makes this next part even harder because what God says to Abraham is, I want you to go on that hill over there and I want you to murder your son. It's not put like that. I mean, the way the Bible puts it is make your son a burnt offering to the Lord. But basically what God is saying is, yo, Abraham, go up on that hill right there and slit your son's throat, kill that little dude, and, let his blood spill all over the ground. Now, under normal circumstances, that's absolutely insane. But given the surrounding circumstances of he finally had this miracle baby of Isaac after 25 years of trying, after he's 100 years old and his wife is totally barren, she's 100 years old too, this is especially insane. And Kierkegaard says this, he said, if God asked you to climb a mountaintop and murder your son, would you be crazy enough to do it? Or would you be crazy enough not to do it? Isn't that so wild? And the story is so allegorical because of this. It's so juicy. And out of this concept, he goes from this concept of infinite resignation, which we won't talk to develop his knight of faith, which is a concept that's ubiquitous in culture. A lot of us are familiar with this term of being a knight of faith. And see, regardless of whether or not your task in life, your mission in life is as crazy as Abraham's to sacrifice your son, the question is what seed of greatness, what vision, what dream has God or your future self or the universe or love or education planted in your heart? And are you crazy enough to bring it to fruition? Are you crazy enough to make it happen? Because as Kierkegaard basically proposes, anything that we want to do in life that is significant, that is remarkable, that is outstanding, that it stands out for the crowd, requires you to be kind of remarkably crazy. Now, if you don't believe me, let's examine some examples. So, was it not absolutely crazy that Martin Luther King marched on Selma? Was it not absolutely insane that Gandhi stood up against the British Empire and then afterwards went on a hunger fast to try to end the conflict between Muslims and Hindus? Was it not crazy that John F. Kennedy said that we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, even though none of the technology existed? Was it not absolutely insane that Stephen King went through 30 rejections of Carrie and still pushed through to publish the book? Was it not crazy that Edison didn't try once or twice or 10 times to create a light bulb, but Edison went through 1,000 different failures to try to create a light bulb? Not 10, not 20, not even 242. Edison created 1,000 different failures before he came up with the light bulb. Now, how many things have you failed at 1,000 times consistently? If you're trying to date and find a romantic partner, a life partner, imagine if you had went on 1,000 dates, 1,000 failed dates in order to find this love of your life. Most people don't even go on 100 dates in their entire lifetime and they complain that, oh, I don't have the one, I haven't found the one. Imagine if you could take 1,000 rejection letters, 1,000 failures, 1,000, you're no good, you suck, you are crazy, you're in the wrong industry, and you still kept going. Imagine if you had that sort of power. Now see, hindsight is all 20/20, because We can look back at people like Edison, and we can look back at people like Stephen King, for example, and say, you know what, if I had the talent of a man like Stephen King, I wouldn't just take 30 rejection slips. I would take 300. I would take 3,000. Carrie was a brilliant book. He would have known that. He would have known what a genius he was, and all of those publishers were completely stupid. If I was that good, I would have done the same thing, and I would have done even more. But the truth is that that's not how most people act. See, I think John Kennedy Toole is a much better representation about how most of us think about ourselves and deal with the results in the world. And he killed himself after only 2 rejections of a confederacy of dunces. And, in my opinion, he's a 10 times better writer. See, results are not your friends at all. And see, the problem is that it's not our fault. We've been raised in a culture that has given us this diluted ethic of consequentialism. And I say diluted because it's absolute, delusional, superstitious BS. And basically what it says to us is that there's a one-to-one correspondence between our effort and results, between doing good and good things happening to you. So in an effort to win, we end up sacrificing our means for our ends, which is not a winning strategy. So there is one secret to life. There is one secret for creating the results that we want to create for ourselves. And let me just flip back here without creating another page. And the secret lies in one word. The secret to creating this lies in only one word. And that word is discipline. Dun, 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 discipline. Now, for some of you, that word is extremely scary. And what it essentially means is it means a daily practice. It means a ritual. It means a sadhana if you're spiritual or into yoga. And we all are familiar with this because we all hopefully wake up in the morning and brush our teeth regardless of what happens in the afternoon and how bad our breath ends up smelling. We still do it. We do it because it's the right thing to do, and we know that it's the right thing to do. But see, the consequentialist ethic is quite different than that. It's the ethic that we've been raised on. It's the ethic of liberal America. It's the ethic of the American dream that we're going to achieve amazing consequences in our lives. But the good then depends on reasons. It depends on circumstances. It depends on where the economy's at. It depends on how high inflation is. It depends on whether or not Susie accepts our invitation to prom. And it depends on whether or not we get our second acceptance letter when we put out our book to be published, or whether or not it's the 241st time that we go to the bank that we get accepted, because on the 242nd one we would have completely failed. Let's maximize the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, but it all depends on circumstance. It all depends on end results. And as Deepak Chopra says, that happiness that depends on reason, or you could say results or circumstance or whatever, is just another form of misery. Happiness that depends on reasons is just another form of misery. Why? So have you ever done anything where you worked your butt off for it? You worked so hard. You put your heart, your soul, everything you had into it, and it just didn't work out. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about it today, still thinking about it and looking back? Chances are you feel pretty much like this shame, anxiety, fear, sadness, anger, whatever you want to call it. Or have you ever dated somebody and thought to yourself like, you know what? This isn't just the right person. They're totally the wrong person. And then look back and said, I've completely wasted my time with this person. Or have you ever planned the most magnificent party only for it to rain on your parade? See, what's my point? My point is that we cannot control results in life. We cannot control results. So the basis of consequentialism is that we can actually control the outcome of events so that the consequence is good. But the truth is we can never do that. You could try your best to work towards something that's amazing and remarkable, only for it to be turned into something that exterminates millions of Jews in gas chambers, your own people. That's why the religion of consequentialism, because these are kind of religious axiomatic principles that we live by, they're just installed in our brain and our heart, and then we move forward as though it's taken for granted, is actually a victim ethic. because we can't control the final result. So we're a victim to what it is. We can never be fully empowered or responsible for it. Now, the alternative to this is what's called deontology. And there's a reason why most of you have probably never heard that word, and it's because it's the exact opposite of a liberal ethic. It's the ethic of fundamentalism. It's the ethic of religion. It's the ethic of extremism. And you might be thinking to yourself right now, Ben, why are you talking to me about an ethic of religious extremism? That makes absolutely no sense. Are you mad? Yes, I'm a little mad. But it's also the personal work ethic that I've observed on every single successful leader of all time, regardless of their political views. It's what they do, not necessarily what they say. And for better or for worse, your moral theory, your underlying moral theory, which you might not even be aware of, determines and defines the good that you experience in life. So if you're a nihilist, for example, nothing is good, nothing at all is good. And if you know any nihilists, and I've been a nihilist during parts of my life, you would know that that's absolutely correct. Their life is totally flat. There's no up, there's no down, it's just down, it's flat, it's at the bottom, it's just this line down here. It all sucks, it's all awful. And they think to them that that is what's good in life, and everybody else wears this gray barrel. And if you're a consequentialist, then good in your life looks something like this. It's success and it's failure and it's all of these outcomes and reasons and circumstances, and you're constantly trying to have things be more, different, better. And the Buddha knew this one very well because it's probably a natural ethic that most people live by, so it's not like just invented by America. It's fairly human to want to maximize outcomes, to want to maximize util values, utility in the world. But he said that this is the pathway of suffering. When Buddha said life is suffering, what he meant was consequentialism. That if you get attached to the outcomes of things, you get attached to the passing nature of the world, it creates dukkha, massive amounts of suffering. Different than this, the deontological way of looking at it is a very different way of looking at good. And to go into it, we need to back up a few hundred years. I think Aristotle is also a good place, a very interesting place to look at it. But let's start with Kant. So Kant was a brilliant philosopher of the Enlightenment. And in his work, The Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, he created really the analytic science of deontology, which tried to convert religious principles of believing in God and moral values coming from God into actually a scientific, rational way of understanding the good, the true, and the beautiful. And essentially what Kant said is that the good does not come from results. The good comes from action based in duty. And Kant was very specific about this. Very, very specific. Because what he said was that the good can't happen on accident. That's consequentialism. The good can't just occur. And meaning, for example, he took it this far, that if I'm sort of holding my water bottle and I drop my water bottle and you catch it before it hits the ground, you're not doing anything good. If there's an old lady that asks you to help her across the street and you do it because she asked you, you're not doing anything good. If, for example, you sponsor a kid in Africa and you save his life, you're not doing anything good. Why? Because what Kant realized is that you can have really good intentions and still get bad consequences. That's this world. And you can have really bad intentions and still get good consequences. That's this world again. I'll give you two examples of that. In high school, I had amazing intentions with somebody in my class. And at the time, I was studying with a man named Gabriel Cousins, and I was a raw food vegan, and I'd seen Gabriel cure diabetes in 30 days, reverse cancers, and cure all types of diseases. And this woman was suffering from major diseases. And what I learned was that diet has a significant impact on people's health. Not for any other reason, but if they change their diet, they might be able to change their quality of life and their entire body, physiology, everything. And so what I noticed was that this girl ate no vegetables and all she ate was candy. So I proposed to her that maybe if she ate more vegetables and did some juice cleanses, and by juice I mean vegetable, not fruit juices, juice cleanses, and kind of considered some of this regimen that Gabriel was doing, that her health might improve and get better. And what do you think happened? She looked at me with such hatred in her eyes. How could you shame me, a victim of my health, like that? How could you be such a misogynistic asshole to propose that this is my fault and that I could somehow change my destiny by changing my diet? You are so insensitive. And literally cast me out of this conversation, and I felt like a pariah. Oh my God. Good intentions, bad results. Now, mind you, now today, she's went through multiple juice cleanses and juice fasts, and her health is significantly improved, but that's besides the point. All things seem to come around. Remember, it would take a God to determine success from failure without making a mistake. And as a little sidebar, I ended up interpreting that experience as deep failure that I literally embodied in my heart and soul, which became a trauma pattern for me for the next 10 years. It even today comes up whenever I'm about to suggest something to another person. I always have in the back of my mind, oh my God, what if they hate me and reject me for what I have to say? Am I really willing to die for this idea? Am I really willing to confront all of their opposition and all the reasons why they might disagree with me? I'm going to get to the end of this video, and some people are going to radically disagree with me. But I've sort of gotten over it now because I understand that if I've got an important piece of information to share, even if it's not complete, it's important that I share it because that's the world that I want to live in, where people have the willingness to help each other and stand for each other's greatness. In that moment, I stood for her. I had good intentions, but it had a bad result. Now, part of that was also how I behaved in the world. Part of that was also how I understood my own place. But let's get back to kind of the point. So the point was that you could have good intentions and bad results. You could also have very bad intentions and have really good results. So I'll give you an example of that. So a teacher and friend of mine, Roxanne Burroughs, said that when she was at her worst point in life, she created maybe the best good in life that she'd ever created in her life because she wanted to beat the crap out of her mom. She wanted to make her mom's life a living hell, and she did. And guess what happened to her mom? Her mom went pop, woke up one day, and ended up creating The Work. Her mom's name, Byron Katie. And The Work has helped millions of people across the planet. It's helped me. It's one of the most efficient and effective personal development tools that I've ever found in my life. If you've never done The Work before, I mean, you could literally take almost every facilitation process and just basically boil it down to the atomic elements of the work, because that's essentially what it is. And Byron Katie gave that gift to the world. And it wouldn't have happened unless of Roxanne's negative intentions. So her negative intentions created massive amounts of good in the world. So Kant said, it cannot be that. It cannot be, good cannot be created accidentally. Otherwise, there's no control over it. Otherwise, it's just this crazy superstitious thing where one day we're doing a rain dance and we're dancing a bit to the left and it rains. And one day we start dancing a bit to the left, it doesn't. So we turn and we dance to the right. And then it rains, so we go, oh, well, rain really comes from dancing a bit to the left and then dancing a bit to the right. This is how our brains work. It's how animals' brains work. B.F. Skinner, the famous behaviorist, in the early days of psychological science being developed, would basically find superstitious patterns in pigeons based on random feeding intervals. So you just feed pigeons in a random way. And they started thinking to themselves, well, if I cluck like this and I lift my head up like that and I turn my head to the side, that's what creates this miraculous heaven-sent manna from God. That's what's doing it. It's my rain dance. And obviously, as we know from our higher perspective, no, it had nothing to do with that. It was just on a random interval. And this pigeon had created this consequentialist ethic for itself in order to try to control life, to make sense of it. So what Kant said is that good cannot come from results. So where does good come from? And Kant said good comes from, get this, a good will. Now you think, what the heck? What do you mean by good will? And what he meant by that was duty. It comes from having a sense of duty. When you're acting from duty, then you're doing something good. Not if you're acting based on circumstances or you're acting based on how you feel. So if the old lady asks you to cross the street and you do it because you're duty bound and you have reasoned to yourself that this is a good act in the world and this is how I act in integrity in the world, then you've done a good thing. But if you did it just because you felt good or because, that's just what you do or you're a good person, then Kant argued you will never do anything good in your life. Now, that's a pretty bold, big statement. And it also came from this other place. Man, I could get so philosophical here. Between what he distinguished as the autonomous will and the heteronymous will. But we're not even going to go there. That's one of my sexiest. That's one of the sexiest distinctions I've ever seen in all of philosophy. So maybe in another video, if people want to hear more about the heteronymous versus the autonomous will, I could talk about that. Oh man, it's so good. So what's the 21st century notion of deontology? Because no one's going to walk around and say, hey, are you in deontology today? Are you in your deontological way of thinking? I mean, that's like crazy talk. That's so highfalutin. It's pedantic. Nobody's going to talk like that. So the 21st century word for deontology is actually integrity. That's how we think about this deontological way of thinking. It's about living in integrity, which actually was repopularized in the 70s by Werner Erhard, the famous founder of S, which later became Landmark and LifeSpring, and really set the road, set the pathway for the whole 21st century personal development movement. Now, what Kant said is that essentially, the only way to live a good life, to put this in 21st century language, the only way to live a good life is to live a life in integrity. That's the only way to do it. So he said it's by focusing on the by focusing on the integrity of our actions, not the outcomes of our actions, that we determine the value of our lives. Now think about how freaking cool that is. Think about how amazingly cool that is. So imagine a world where everybody does what's right regardless of the circumstances. So this ship might be totally sinking, but they're still doing what's right. They don't just resort to crazed madness and go absolutely ape crap. They don't try to move their funnel every 5 seconds when the ball bearing misses, but they actually commit to something. They commit and they resolve that I'm going to behave in this world like this no matter what. I'm going to stand for my principles, not fight for them. So there was a great study that I love that kind of demonstrates this idea a bit called the Good Samaritan, where researchers wanted to give preachers an opportunity to preach about the Good Samaritan, the person who helps a fellow neighbor, who helps strangers, who helps all people that they come into contact with. And they had a little setup to this experiment where along the way to deliver this sermon, they would put a man who is in need of help. And they wanted to see, would the Good Samaritan stop to help this man or would they not? Now, there were two controlled conditions. One controlled condition was where the preacher was told that he had plenty of time to get to the lecture and preach his sermon. And the second controlled condition was the preacher was told that he had no time. He was running late to preach this sermon. Now, what do you think happened? Do you think that the preacher on the way to preach about the Good Samaritan, helping your fellow man, especially a stranger, stopped and helped his fellow stranger when his fellow stranger needed it? Well, in the first group, which he was under no time pressure, yeah, he helped. But under the second group, where he was under a time pressure, he didn't help. Now, here's what's really interesting about this story, because the researchers reasoned that, well, the reason why the preacher didn't stop in order to help this person is because he was out of time. And time is really what creates so many problems in our lives. It's true, and that's one that we could talk about. It's one of also the other 6 opponents of destiny. But they thought that since we live in such a fast culture, so few people want to help each other because they're always in such a rush. So even a preacher who's preaching about the Good Samaritan is not going to help his fellow citizen when he's in a rush too. But see, it's a correlation. I don't see that necessarily as a causation here. Just like when ice cream sales go up, ice cream didn't cause more increased murders during summer in the ghetto. Correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation. See, I think what the bigger picture here is that even our religious leaders, even the people who are supposed to be preaching deontology and always doing the right thing, have fallen victim to this consequentialist ethic of more, better, different, of constantly trying to rise and succeed and have these good outcomes. And it becomes extremely confusing about what to eventually do. See, when you trade your definition of success from outcomes to integrity. You're no longer at the mercy of circumstances, and you're finally under the influence of finally you're under responsibility for your actions. So you can actually create what you want to create. You can actually create good. You can create this amazing progress line for yourself. And see, this is all based on consequentialist superstition. It's based on this illusion of control, that I can actually control outcomes in my life. But see, I want you to get that you cannot control outcomes in life. It's not possible. Controlling outcomes in life is about effective as praying to win the lottery, or praying that a car is going to end up in your lot. How well does that work? I mean, Janis Joplin had a great song about this that she literally recorded and sang once 3 days before she died. And she said, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all drive Porsches. I must make amends. Worked hard all my lifetime. No help from my friends. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? Oh Lord, won't you buy me a color TV? Dialing for dollars is looking for me. I'll wait for delivery each day until 3. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a color TV?" And it's a joke because it's not a joke. And I could say so much more about all of this, and we could go way deeper into philosophical rabbit holes. But, I'll end with this, that Kant didn't succeed in his effort to really institutionalize deontological thinking because he took it so far as he wanted to create a universal moral system that we could all follow just like undeniably well, and there would be no questioning in it, called the categorical imperative. And as you know, a lot of us do not follow the categorical imperative. But let's go back to the secret. Let's go back to this place of discipline. What is the secret for going from this graph, this place of progress is misery, not really progress, but going to this place of linear progress where you actually can experience happiness and not just total and utter misery every day of life? And there are 3 ways, there are 3 keys to get this. So the first is you've got to have a big, hairy, audacious vision. You've got to have something that drives you. You've got to have something that you put up on the wall and you go, this would excite me. And it excites you all the time. As one of my mentors, Mark Victor Hansen, says, that it's your frequency of interaction with the brightness of the future that motivates you. So if the brightness of your future is you see yourself on a big stage entertaining millions of people, or you seeing yourself ending racism or world hunger, or you see yourself creating this worldwide brand that's going to transform the planet, that's your big vision. That's the thing at the end of it. But see, here's the next step that's the most important step. And well, I guess they're all 3 the most important step. The second step is you got to convert that vision into a series of actions that you can utilize as a daily discipline. Now, when I say actions, I don't mean I'm closing 3 sales every single day. See, that's not an action that you can control. That is a result. I didn't say you create a series of results that are going to create this unified vision. No, I said you condense it, you distill it into a series of actions. Actions are things that you can do regardless of the results that will guarantee you moving up the ladder progress towards that vision. Now, there's so much more to say about that one, but let's go on to the third. And the third key, this one's really important, is that you judge your success each step along the way by integrity, not outcomes. Let me say that again. You judge your success each step along the way by integrity, not by outcomes. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, it's really simple. So, if you judge your success by outcomes, it looks like this. You're totally out of control. There's no way that you can control outcomes. There's no way you can control results. But if you judge your success by integrity, whether or not you took action, whether or not you woke up the time you said you were going to wake up, whether or not you spent the amount of time that you dedicated for yourself based on your daily discipline towards your vision, whether or not you actually made the 3 calls which you said you're going to make. That's how you judge your success, by what you can control, what is within your power, what is within your responsibility, which moves you from a victim ethic to an ethic of responsibility, an ethic of empowerment, an ethic of integrity. So, like I said, you give up results and outcomes for discipline and integrity. Now, some of you, again, might be thinking to yourself, that doesn't work. I can't do that. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I've listened to this whole video just to get to the end to hear that in order to get to my goal, my ultimate vision, I need to give up all outcomes. How does that make any sense? Ben, this is so obviously wrong. If I was a fighter pilot or just the pilot of an aircraft and I was navigating from this side of the country to that side of the country and I didn't care about results, what would happen? I would crash right into the face of Mount Rushmore. There's no way to navigate without looking at results. Obviously, duh. And I'm saying, yes, there's totally another way. And I'm saying that it is exactly results that screw you up so much in your lives. So let me put this all a completely different way. I'm going to give you an absolutely different paradigm. So if you've listened this long for about an hour or so, here's another way to think about all of this that might make more sense to you, that combines a bit of Ken Wilber with a bit of this business guru, Dr. Ishak Adiz's ideas. Let's start with Ken Wilber's idea of A-Qual. And to really simplify all of it, there are basically multiple lives of development. And those lines of development are personal, they're also for the world, they're for business, they're institutional, they're group level, but let's just focus on the general aspect that there are multiple lines of development, just like there are multiple intelligences. So for example, you might be a level 10 on the cognitive line of development, but you might only be a level 1 on the kinesthetic line of development. This is the line of being a dancer, or being an actor, or being a basketball player. And you might be a level, 15 on the scale of emotional intelligence, on your emotional development. But you might only be level, 2 on the scale of your business capacity, your business development. So hold that in mind for a second. And now let me draw another picture for you. And this represents the life cycle of every system, whether or not that system is a human being, or whether or not that system is a country, or whether or not that system is a business. And everything starts off where? It starts off in infancy. Then it moves on to adolescence. Then from adolescence, it moves on to young adult. And then from young adult, it moves on to, let's see if you can see this, adult. And then from adult, it moves on, let's just say, to senior. And then from senior, it moves on, let's just say, to elder. And then from elder, it moves back to infancy, right? It's like once you get old enough, you die, or, it's like Benjamin Button in some ways. So here's what's really interesting, is that you might be an adult cognitively. You might be an adult, you might be an engineer who's an absolute adult. You're smart, you're intelligent, your cognitive line of development is a level 10, it's a level 20, it's a level whatever you want to call it. But you want to learn how to dance. So what happens? Well, you think to yourself, I'm so smart, I'm so great, I'm so developed, I'm an adult in my level of development, so when I get into that dance room, I'm going to crush it. But you're only a level 1 in your line of development for the kinesthetic line. Now, some people are talented, so they just start off with a higher level of development. Some people have a highly developed musical talent coming out of the womb. My friend Tal Wilkenfeld literally came out knowing how to play bass. Some people are like that. But this engineer starts off with just a level 1 development in the kinesthetic line. So he is in what stage of development when he starts to dance? He's in his infancy. Now, what happens when you're an infant in any line of work? What results do you get? Well, you only get one. And it's called failure, 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 failure. It's called looking bad. It's called looking horrible. It's called shitting all over yourself. It's called falling all over yourself. It's called nothing works. Nothing is actually the way that you want it to be. You've got this adult vision for how you see yourself moving, but your body is a total infant and it doesn't work. So what happens? Well, you've got two choices. Either you just don't care about results and you keep dancing and dancing and dancing your heart out, not worrying about how bad you look, not worrying about how many people are laughing at you, not worrying about all the people that say, you're never going to dance, dude. And then, boom, you get to adolescence and you start failing a bit less. You start doing a bit better. You start learning some dance moves. And then, boom, you stick with it and all of a sudden you get all the way around and you complete the cycle. But that's not what happens with most people. What happens with most people is that we're constantly measuring our success based on an absolute factor, not a relative factor of where we are actually at. So even though the engineer is only at a 1 with his level of dance skills, he might compare himself to the absolute level of a dancer who might be a level 15 and say, you know what? I'm just not a dancer. There's no way that I can do this. My feedback sucks. My skill sucks. I'm out. I'm done. Now, here's the trick is that towards anything you want to create, you're always starting here. And what a problem in infancy looks like is very different than a problem in adolescence and young adulthood. For example, if you're pulling on yourself in infancy, is that a problem? Yes or no? It's not a problem. That's what infants do. They fail. They get everything wrong. They just have no idea what's happening. But as they grow up, if they start pooing all over themselves in adulthood, is that a problem? Yes, because that's one of the things that's supposed to be solved over this period of time. Now, here's the truth, is that our culture lives by, and our minds operate by euphemisms and dysphemisms. So, for example, when Howard Schultz goes and visits 242 banks, we call the first bank a failure, the second bank a failure, the third bank a rejection, the fourth bank a rejection, the fifth bank a failure, the sixth bank a failure. And we say that he had 242 rejections or failures. But see, let's think about failure in a different context, like learning how to play piano. So if you sat down and learned how to play piano and you got a wrong note as you were learning your first dun 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 dun. I think that's a Mozart song. Or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, How I Wonder What You Are. Or you're learning, a Mozart little lullaby, and you start getting the notes wrong. What do we call that? Do we call that a failure? Do we call that the keys rejecting your fingers? No. What we call that is practice. It's just called practice. It's such an obvious thing. It goes back to that word that I used earlier. I said discipline. I said daily practice. I said sadhana. I said these are actions that lead you towards whatever you want to create, but they're not the result themselves. Now, see, with practice, what happens? Do you get better or worse with practice? Well, with perfect practice, you get perfect, but let's just assume that you're practicing in a way that stretches you, and you keep stretching. The baby who doesn't know how to walk just keeps practicing walking. Failure, 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 failure. And then what happens? One day they can stand. Now they keep falling, but now they got a bit of standing until eventually, boom, they're running and they're really able to move and jive and, they can start playing basketball, which is absolutely amazing. But we didn't call all those steps in between failure. We called them practice. Now, if you thought about all of the results that you got as just practice, which is really just failure, but it's a euphemism for failure. It's a euphemism for the same idea as opposed to the dysphemism, failure, which was a scary term, oh my God. But if you could really embody it as practice, because the results didn't matter, what mattered was the practice. Don't you get that? That what matters is the failure. You fail to fail, and you fail and fail until you fail to fail. You fall and fall until you fail to fall. That's how everyone grows. That's how you experience the linear growth of progress. So that's a whole other way of seeing it, and that's a way that you can kind of climb that ladder. It's the same concept written in a different way, because it's the integrity of showing up, practicing piano every day that gets you good at it. It's the integrity of continuing to try to sell your business that gets you through the 242 rejections in order to create a little company called Starbucks. Now, most people give up and they quit way before that, but for me, what I understand, especially if you're watching this video, there aren't going to be very many people watching this video that are sadistic, rapist killers that want to destroy the planet. I don't think that they're going to be interested in this, especially not watching for a whole hour. And by the way, if they are, that means that there's probably something really valuable here that's especially important for you and especially important for both of us, that we all get it so that we can combat negative forces in the world and create an integrally fit world for ourselves. A world where we can flourish. A world where us and our families can experience all of the divine benefits that are available to us right now, to experience happiness as opposed to all of those patterns of suffering which most people experience on a day-to-day basis. You might have been experiencing those earlier today, and you're going to switch it by the end of the day. I promise, by the end of this video, if you can make this change, if you can adopt this thought process, your entire paradigm for living will change, and you will feel magnificently more happy. So let me leave you with this idea that I think is very relevant. So this comes from the scene, one of the final scenes of one of my favorite movies called Adaptation. And you don't need much backstory on this, but it's a scene where there are two brothers, and one brother, Charlie, has never fully understood his brother. He's always judged him his whole life and thought that he was less than, and, you know, just kind of thought that he was an idiot, basically. And in this moment, in this scene, he finally understands his brother, and he finally gets it. And there's a beautiful love that emerges between them. And the idea within it is just one that I found to be so staggeringly beautiful. So let me just tell you the scene. So in the scene, Charlie starts off and he says, you know, I've always admired you, Donald. I've always admired you. I've spent my entire life worrying about what other people think of me, and you're just oblivious. And Donald looked back at him and says, I'm not oblivious. And Charlie says, well, there was this time in high school, and I was watching you from the library window, and you were talking to Sarah Marsh. And Donald says, oh, God, I loved Sarah Marsh. And Charlie continues, yeah, and you guys were flirting, and she was being really sweet to you. And Donald says, yeah, I remember that. And Charlie says, well, when you walked away, she started making fun of you with her friend Kim Minetti. And it was like they were laughing at me. You didn't know it all. You seemed so happy. And Donald looks back and he says, yeah, I knew. I heard it all. And Charlie says, well, then why did you seem so happy? And Donald says, I loved Sarah, Charles. I loved her. And it was mine, that love. I owned it. Even Sarah didn't have the right to take it away from me. You can love whoever you want. And Charlie looks back at him and he says, but she thought you were pathetic. And Donald says, that's her business, not mine. You are what you love, not what loves you. That's what I decided a long time ago. And then they hold this moment of connection. And finally, Donald says, what's up? And Charlie says, thank you. And it doesn't matter whether or not success for you is creating a magnificent business or getting your manuscripts published or feeling happier on a day-to-day basis or improving your relationships with your family or with a loved one or finding that thing that you've always been looking for. The secret is you must give up results for discipline. That's all it is. And if you can do that, your line of progress becomes linear. You develop more resources along the path because instead of feeling that constant sway of the grass is always greener, ups and the downs, and that bipolar way of living that has zero consistency and is just absolutely and utterly maddening and frustrating, everything is a moment of power for you. Everything helps you progress towards your ultimate ends and is a place where you feel supercharged and you can use the resources of your responsibility and your action in order to keep driving forward where most people would quit and turn away paces before you. Howard Schultz, Edison, Stephen King, Katy Perry, Walt Disney. The list goes on and on and on. Amazing, extraordinary people in life who were willing to withstand the burning trial of results, who are willing to let go of results for a discipline, to let go of results for a practice, to let go of results for the integrity of their actions, to not focus on outcomes, but to keep moving forward regardless of them. And today, in this moment, we've only covered one of the 6 opponents to destiny. And there are 5 more, and they're all very important. But this one you can actually apply today. You could change your entire mindset right now if you just say to yourself, gosh, what's my vision? What do I want to create in this world? How do I put that before me? And then you strip that down into actions. You don't worry about results. You don't care about outcomes. You say, what are the actions that I would need to take on a daily basis to achieve this? If it's building your business, maybe the action is you make 100 sales phone calls per day. Not 50, not 25, not closing 3 deals. You make 100 sales calls to new prospects every single day. That is something that you can control. Now, you might not want to do it, but that was Kant's whole point, is that doing what's good and what's right is usually not what we like. It's usually not what we feel like doing, which is why so few people ever create something magnificently beautiful in the world, and why more people destroy what's good and beautiful than create it. So much love, many blessings, and feel the freedom, the real freedom of integrity.